The Senate chamber was alive with a restless energy. The heavy air, thick as the ancient pillars, bore witness to the swirling storm of voices and veiled threats. The marble floor, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, seemed to pulse beneath the weight of history and the desperate ambitions of those who now filled its vast space. Flickering torches cast wavering pools of light, throwing senators' faces into sharp relief, some pale with fear, others flushed with anger, and a few masked by carefully cultivated calm. At the heart of the chamber stood Cassius Drusus, his rugged frame imposing amid the throng. The scar that marred his left cheek seemed almost to deepen in the torchlight, a visible testament to battles both physical and political. His cold eyes scanned the assembly with a predator's focus, every twitch of his lips a silent calculation. He was a man who had clawed his way from the ranks of soldiers to the echelons of power through sheer force and cunning. Tonight, as the Senate's reckoning unfolded, Cassius was determined to tighten his grip on the crumbling empire. Opposing him, though less visible, were the seeds of dissent sown by years of ruthless purges and unyielding ambition. Several senators, once loyal to Cassius's rising tide, now whispered in quiet corners, their voices laced with doubt and fear. The brutality with which Cassius had dispatched his enemies had begun to unsettle even his closest allies. The balance of power was fragile, and cracks had begun to appear in the once solid front. Watching these shifting currents was Livia Valeria, her presence understated but no less formidable. In the shadows beyond the Senate chamber, she convened with a select group of senators whose loyalty to Cassius had wavered. Her sharp eyes, dark and piercing, held the calm assurance of one who knew the value of timing and subtlety. She spoke in measured tones, each word chosen like a deft stroke of a brush upon a delicate canvas. "We stand at a crossroads," Livia intoned softly, her voice a quiet command that rippled through the small gathering. "Cassius's path leads only to ruin for Rome and for those who follow him. There is another way, a chance to preserve what remains of our legacy, but it requires courage and resolve." A senator, tense and wary, leaned forward. "But can we trust the Valerius? They have clung to fading ideals while the world burns around us." Livia's gaze did not waver. "We do not ask for blind trust. We offer partnership, a future forged from the ashes." Meanwhile, within the Senate chamber, Marcus Valerius observed the unfolding drama with a heavy heart. Tall and dignified, his silvering dark hair framing a face etched with care and contemplation, Marcus stood apart from the fray. His eloquence and steadfastness had won him allies, yet the tide was turning against the traditionalists. The weight of the empire's decline pressed upon him, each day a battle not only for survival but for the soul of Rome. As voices rose and fell in impassioned debate, Marcus caught the wary glances exchanged among senators. The unity Cassius had once commanded was fragmenting, and the consequences would ripple far beyond the marble halls. The empire teetered on the edge of chaos, and Marcus's mind raced with the implications, not only for Rome but for his family. Cassius, sensing the shifting winds, moved with the precision of a seasoned predator. His scarred face hardened into a grim mask as he sought to reassert control. "We cannot afford weakness," he declared, his voice cutting through the chamber like steel. "The old ways are dead. We must embrace the strength that I offer, or perish in the ruins." His words drew a mixture of cheers and hesitant murmurs, but the cracks were visible senators exchanged furtive looks, some stepping back from the fervor. The ruthless purges and threats had succeeded in silencing many, but fear was a brittle foundation. Outside the chamber, Livia's coalition gathered strength. Her deft manipulation of fears and ambitions began to tilt the scales. Through whispered assurances and promises of protection, she wove a web that threatened to entrap Cassius's hold. Each senator she swayed was a chink in his armor. The evening wore on, the Senate a crucible of tension and uncertainty. Marcus, standing at the margin, dared to hope that Livia's subtlety might carve a path through the darkness. Yet he knew all too well the cost of such power struggles, the sacrifices, the betrayals, the erosion of ideals. As the session drew to a close, Cassius's glare met Livia's steady gaze. Unspoken challenges passed between them, a battle of wills that extended beyond words. The future of Rome and of the Valerius family hung in the balance. This reckoning was far from over. The ashes of empire smoldered beneath the surface, and the next move would determine whether the flames would consume all or kindle a fragile hope. The war room was thick with the scent of burning tallow and the low murmur of strategists bent over fragile parchments. Tiberius stood at the center, his broad hands tracing the worn edges of a map spread across a heavy oaken table. The flickering torchlight played across his weathered face, deepening the lines carved by years of battle and burden. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the positions of legions and the erratic movements of barbarian forces massing beyond the city's borders. But his thoughts were chiefly occupied with a more immediate concern: Marcus Valerius, his old comrade and friend, languishing in the cold shadows of a prison cell. Tiberius's loyalty was no secret. Since Marcus's arrest, he had become a pillar of unwavering support, refusing to abandon the senator despite the dangerous political currents swirling around him. The city was a tinderbox, and any misstep could ignite open conflict. Yet, within this labyrinth of intrigue, Tiberius sought a path that might both protect Marcus and preserve the fragile peace. Elsewhere, in the ancestral home that had once echoed with laughter and debate, Livia Valeria moved with measured grace. Her austere beauty belied the storm of emotions beneath her composed exterior. Each evening, she convened with a select few senators, those not yet fully swayed by Cassius Drusus's ruthless ascendancy. Her voice was quiet but firm, weaving arguments laced with urgency and subtle threats. Every word was a thread in a delicate web of alliances, spun to shield her husband from the clutches of their enemies. Within the stone confines of the prison, Marcus sat in shadows, the chill seeping into his bones. His tall frame was bent slightly forward, hands clasped as if in silent prayer. The muffled sounds of footsteps and distant voices reached him like faint echoes of a world slipping further away. Despite the darkness and despair, there was a steadfastness in his gaze, a flicker of hope kindled by the knowledge that Tiberius had not forsaken him. His mind wandered through the corridors of memory, the Senate chambers filled with heated debate, the sunlit gardens of his youth, the proud faces of his family. Each recollection was a bomb against the encroaching gloom. Back in the Senate, Cassius Drusus commanded attention with a presence as imposing as the scars that marred his rugged face. Standing beneath the towering marble columns, he spoke with a voice low and cold, his words dripping with veiled menace. The chamber was thick with unease as senators exchanged glances, wary of the dangerous man who sought to reshape Rome in his own ruthless image. Cassius's rise was a stark testament to the empire's decay, a figure who thrived amidst chaos, unbound by the old codes of honor. Tiberius's plan unfolded with cautious precision. He dispatched trusted messengers to sympathetic commanders stationed at the city's gates, urging vigilance and readiness. Simultaneously, he reached out to wavering senators, offering quiet assurances that Marcus's release would serve not only justice but the empire's stability. It was a balancing act, fraught with peril. Too much pressure risked provoking Cassius's wrath, too little threatened Marcus's fate. Days passed in a tense standoff. Rumors swirled through Rome's twisting streets, whispers of revolt, secret meetings, and shifting allegiances. Livia's network of influence expanded, her subtle manipulations a counterweight to Cassius's aggressive machinations. Yet, beneath the surface, fear lingered. The empire's foundations were cracking, and the cost of loyalty was steep. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Tiberius stood atop the city walls, gazing out over the sprawling metropolis. The fading light painted the ruins in a mournful gold, a reminder of the grandeur slipping beyond reach. He clenched his jaw, resolve hardening like forged steel. For Marcus, for Rome, he would not falter. The chapter closes on the precipice of change, with Tiberius's efforts kindling a fragile hope amid the gathering storm. Yet the shadow of Cassius looms large, a reminder that loyalty alone may not be enough to withstand the ruthless tides reshaping their world. The chamber was thick with the scent of burning wax and damp stone, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced nervously across the cold walls. Gaius Valerius leaned forward, his eyes blazing with fervor as he spoke in hurried whispers to Julia. "We cannot wait any longer," he urged, his voice taut with impatience. "Every moment we hesitate, Rome's enemies grow stronger. The barbarians will not wait for us to be ready. We must seize the moment, or all is lost." Julia's gaze was steady, her expression cautious yet understanding. "Gaius' haste risks everything we've built. The emissaries demand respect and careful negotiation. If we push too hard, they might withdraw their support entirely." She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm, grounding his restless energy. "We must be patient, even when the world seems to be crumbling around us." He pulled his arm away, frustration flickering across his youthful face. "Patience has brought us nothing but ruin thus far. My father clings to fading ideals while the city burns beneath us. We must act, or be consumed in the ashes." At that moment, Marcus Valerius entered the chamber, his tall figure silhouetted against the fading dusk visible through the narrow window. His silvering dark hair caught the last rays of sunlight, and his sharp eyes scanned the room with a mixture of weariness and resolve. The weight of Rome's decline pressed heavily upon his shoulders, yet his voice remained steady as he addressed his son. "Gaius, your zeal is commendable, but reckless actions will jeopardize all we strive to protect. The barbarians are not mere tools to be commanded. They are allies whose respect we must earn." Gaius met his father's gaze, defiance flaring. "Father, respect is earned through strength and decisive action, not hesitation. We are running out of time." Livia Valeria entered quietly behind Marcus, her composed presence filling the room. Her sharp, dark eyes softened briefly as they met Gaius's before turning to Marcus. "Perhaps it is time to consider that the world demands a new approach. Your adherence to tradition, Marcus, though noble, blinds you to the necessity of change." Marcus sighed deeply, feeling the growing chasm between his ideals and the harsh realities his family faced. "Livia, I understand the need for pragmatism, but we must not lose sight of who we are. Betrayal of our values will only hasten the empire's fall." The tension was palpable as father and son stood divided, the future of the Valerius family and Rome itself hanging in the balance. Days later, under a veil of secrecy, Gaius met with the barbarian emissaries in a secluded grove beyond the city's walls. The air was crisp and charged with unease as the emissaries, their armor clinking softly, listened to Gaius's impassioned proposals. However, His eagerness led him to make demands that unsettled the delicate trust painstakingly built. One of the emissaries, a towering figure with a scarred visage and piercing eyes, leaned forward, voice low and menacing. "You speak boldly for one so young, Valerius. Your demands betray impatience and disrespect. Our alliance is fragile. Do you wish to see it broken?" The gathering grew tense, the sound of swords being cautiously drawn from scabbards, heightening the sense of imminent danger. Gaius's heart pounded as he realized the precariousness of their position. This reckless gamble threatened to unravel everything his family had fought for. Back in the ancestral home, Marcus paced the marble floors of the atrium, the weight of his family's fate pressing down like a stone. Livia approached him quietly, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Marcus, you must act swiftly. Gaius's recklessness endangers us all. If the alliance breaks, we will be vulnerable to Cassius and the chaos he sows." Marcus stopped, meeting her gaze with a conflicted expression. "I fear the cost of my son's ambition, Livia, but to oppose him openly risks fracturing our family beyond repair." Livia's eyes glistened briefly with unshed tears. Sometimes survival demands sacrifice. As night fell, Marcus stood once more on the balcony overlooking Rome, the city a patchwork of crumbling rooftops and flickering torchlights. The distant clang of metal and murmurs of unrest seeped through the air. His mind wrestled with the impossible choice before him: uphold the loyalty to his son and risk political ruin, or sever ties to preserve the fragile remnants of their legacy. The breaking point had come, and with it, the uncertain dawn of a new order. "We stand on the edge of a precipice," Marcus whispered to the night. "To fall or to leap that is the question." As the first stars pierced the velvet sky, the Valerius family braced for the storm to come. Their bonds tested as never before, their futures yet unwritten. The twilight of the Roman Empire was not merely a collapse of stone and statute, but a fracture within the hearts of those who had pledged their lives to its glory. Marcus Valerius found himself adrift in these waning days, the weight of tradition pressing heavily upon shoulders once broad with hope. As he sat alone in his chamber, the flickering flame of a single oil lamp casting trembling shadows upon the walls, the past surged forth unbidden, vivid as the marble columns that lined his family's ancestral home. He was again the boy of 16, standing tall amidst the grandeur of the Valerius estate, the scent of crushed laurel leaves and freshly swept stone mingling in the warm, late afternoon air. His father, a man carved from the very ideals of Rome, spoke with a voice as unyielding as the marble pillars framing the courtyard. "Marcus, the empire is not merely land or gold, it is honor, duty, the unbroken chain of our ancestors. To falter in tradition is to unravel the fate of Rome itself." The young Marcus had nodded solemnly, the weight of expectation settling deep within his chest. A mantle not yet heavy, but destined to grow with each passing year. His eyes, dark and sharp even then, had searched the horizon beyond the city walls, the sprawling city of Rome, vibrant yet fragile in its eternal dance between glory and decay. Years later, the Senate chamber bore witness to a different Marcus. The air hung thick with whispered alliances and veiled threats beneath the towering arches. His voice, steady yet laden with an undercurrent of desperation, carried through the marble hall as he defended the old ways. Rome's strength lies in her traditions, the foundations laid by our forefathers. To abandon these is to invite chaos and ruin. His words were met with a chorus of dissent, younger senators whose eyes gleamed with ambition and the promise of change. Marcus felt the fissures within the Republic widen, each challenge to the past a dagger to the heart of his beliefs. Yet beneath his steadfast rhetoric stirred a quiet turmoiler, creeping doubt that whispered of a future unrecognizable and perhaps inevitable. At home, the fragile veneer of strength showed cracks beneath the strain of ceaseless conflict. In the dim light of their study, Marcus and Livia exchanged glances laden with the unspoken. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, reflected the steel of her resolve and the shadows of her fears. "We stand on the edge of a precipice," she murmured, her voice low yet firm. "Clinging to old ideals will only drag us down." Marcus's reply was a silence heavy with sorrow, the gulf between them widening not from lack of love, but from the divergent paths their hearts urged them to take. Their son, Gaius, restless and fiery, embodied this schism, his passion for a new order, a constant challenge to the legacy Marcus sought to uphold. Meanwhile, Lucilla, the family's gentle conscience, sought solace where Rome's grandeur once inspired awe within the fading light of the gods. In a small, neglected shrine, she knelt with hands clasped, her voice a fragile thread weaving through the stillness. "If the gods have turned their gaze away, guide us through this darkness," she whispered, the flicker of candlelight dancing upon her delicate features. Her faith, waning yet unbroken, was a beacon in the encroaching gloom. These recollections wove through Marcus's mind as the city outside crumbled, the streets echoing with uncertainty and decay. Each memory was a shard of the past, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the present with painful clarity. The ideals that had defined him now threatened to imprison him, his rigidity a fortress against the inevitable tide of change. He pondered the bitter paradox. The very convictions that had once fortified Rome's grandeur were now the chains binding its final days. Could he, a scion of noble tradition, find within himself the strength to bend without breaking? The question gnawed at his soul, a relentless spectre haunting the corridors of his mind. As dawn broke over the city, casting pale light upon the ruins and the rising smoke, Marcus resolved to confront the shadows of his past, not as a captive, but as a man seeking a path through the twilight. The empire's fate was entwined with his own, and in this crucible of despair and hope, the true measure of his legacy would be forged. But as the sun ascended, so too did the voices of change grow louder, beckoning with promises that both frightened and intrigued. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and sacrifice. Yet in the heart of decay, amidst the ashes of empire, a fragile hope flickered, a testament to the enduring spirit of Rome and those who bore its name. The chapter closed, not with answers, but with the stirring of a question that would shape the days to come. Could Marcus Valerius, bound by the shadows of his past, rise to meet the dawn of a new world without losing the soul of Rome itself? And thus the story continued, the echoes of history whispering through time, the legacy of a man and an empire intertwined in their final desperate dance. The heavy doors of the Valerius estate groaned under the weight of history as Marcus Valerius entered the atrium, his footsteps echoing softly on the cold marble floor. Evening had fallen over Rome, but the city's distant cries and restless murmurs seeped through the stone walls, a reminder of the empire's unraveling. Around the great table, oil lamps cast flickering shadows on the faces of his family. Livia stood poised, her dark eyes sharp and unfocused. Gaius paced with restless energy, and Lucilla sat quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze distant. The air was thick with tension, a palpable weight pressing down with the inevitability of the decision they faced. Marcus's heart tightened as he began, his voice low but resolute. "We stand at a precipice. The Rome we knew, the Rome of honor, tradition, and laws, no longer the Rome of today. Cassius, Drusus, and his faction rise with the tides of change, and to resist them without allies is to invite ruin. Livia's eyes flickered with approval, though her expression remained composed. Father, we cannot cling to ideals while the city crumbles. To survive, we must forge alliances with those who hold power now, even if it means letting go of some old loyalties. Gaius stopped pacing and looked toward his father. We must be bold. The old Rome is dead. If we do not embrace the new order, we will be swept away. Father, I have spoken with barbarian chieftains and factions beyond the Senate's gaze. They offer strength where Rome falters. Lucilla's voice broke the rising tide of pragmatism. And what of our soul? What becomes of our honor if we betray the very legacy we were raised to protect? Are we to become monsters in the ashes of the empire? Marcus sighed deeply. That is the price of survival, sister. I do not relish it. But to perish clinging to ghosts serves no one. We must choose. Die with Rome's fading ideals, or live to shape what comes next. The room fell into silence, each weighed by the gravity of their choice. Shadows danced on the walls as the lamps guttered, echoing the flickering hopes and fears within each heart. Days later, the Senate chamber buzzed with uneasy whispers as the Valerius family made their announcement. Marcus stood at the podium, his stature still commanding despite the weariness etched in his silvering hair. His voice was steady but carried the weight of reluctant concession. Esteemed colleagues, the Valerius family acknowledges the changing tides in our beloved Rome. To preserve our legacy and the stability of the empire, we will renounce certain traditional loyalties and seek alliance with emerging powers who hold the future in their hands. The chamber erupted in murmurs, some filled with shock, others with cynical approval. Cassius Drusus observed from the shadows, a slow, triumphant smile curling his scarred lips. The old guard's fracture was now public, and the balance of power shifted palpably. Back at the estate, Lucilla retreated to the garden as dusk bled into night. The scent of wilting roses mingled with the cool air, carrying the melancholy of a world losing its grace. She clutched her rosary, whispering prayers for Rome's salvation, her heart heavy with sorrow for the family she loved and the empire she mourned. Meanwhile, in a shadowed tavern, Gaius and Livia plotted the family's next moves. Maps sprawled before them, dotted with marks and coded messages. Their faces were etched with determination, but beneath the surface lay uneasy recognition that survival demanded sacrifices, not just of politics, but of trust and identity. Father's hesitation may cost us, Livia murmured, eyes narrowing. We must act swiftly, or Cassius will tighten his grip. Gaius nodded grimly. The barbarians won't wait. Neither should we. As the night deepened, so too did the fissures within the Valerius family. Yet, in their fractured unity lay a fragile hope that from the ashes of the old empire, a new legacy might yet arise. But at what cost? The city's distant bells tolled midnight, a somber cadence underscoring the uncertain road ahead, leaving Marcus and his family to grapple with the price of survival in a world transformed.